We're in we're in February 2026, and we're still having a conversation about why are there still so few Black international heads of schools. So today, our illustrious panel will help us unpack this topic as we go more in detail. For those of you who know me, again, my name is Mona. For those of you who do not, my name is Dr. Mona Fairley, and it's such a pleasure to meet you guys. And I look forward to this thoughtful discourse that we will have this morning around this particular subject. As we progress, I would love to have an opportunity to introduce our panel. And I am so excited about that because I know each and every one of the panel members in very different ways, and they all have a special part and a special place in my heart because of my connection to them. In addition to that, they all have a very unique experience as it relates to international schools, not only their experiences, but the roles that they've played in these schools and their perspectives in terms of governance structures, leadership structures, and why we still have this problem today. So we can go ahead and move into the introductions if you like, Kevin. All right. So we have Dr. LaSandra White, Dr. Megel Barker, and Dr. Jennifer Beckwith joining us this morning. And I'm going to read their profiles to you guys so you will know who they are and their abilities to speak on this topic. Because as I mentioned previously, it's varied and their perspectives are spot on. First, I want to start by introducing Dr. LaSandra White, who actually serves in Saudi Arabia currently. Dr. White's dedication to enhancing educational frameworks has made her a pivotal figure in curriculum development and revision, ensuring that educational programs are both contemporary and comprehensive. As a school director, Dr. White has been instrumental in guiding institutions towards better practices and improved outcomes. Her commitment to student success and innovative pedagogical strategies provide environments where students and educators both thrive. Please just give Dr. LaSandra White a round of applause as we used to do in the classroom. Coming up next, we have Dr. Megel Barker. Dr. Barker is an international school leader and educator with over 2 decades of experience in education across multiple contexts. He currently serves as head of lower and middle school at TASIS England and has a range of leadership roles focused on instructional improvement, school culture, and system development. Dr. Barker is also a published editor and author in the field of international education, leadership, with multiple books exploring leadership, inclusion, and emerging challenges in international schools. Give him a round of applause. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Barker. And next we have Dr. Jennifer Beckwith. Dr. Beckwith is a visionary leader and educator that is equity focused and has over 30 years of global experience across 8 countries. As a former founding head and director of American United School and other schools across the globe, she led the creation of a fully accredited pre-K through 12th grade American school in Kuwait, guiding it from concept to a thriving institution recognized for academic excellence, cultural responsiveness, and inclusive leadership. Dr. Beckwith currently serves as an educational consultant for international schools, partnering with leadership teams to strengthen equity practices, clarify transformational goals, and build sustainable systems. And she now consults all over the globe. Would you give her a hand for us, please? All right. So I don't want to spend any time going back and forth. We're going to dive into our questions because they're very intentional and purposeful. In addition to that, as I read the question, my colleagues on the panel will respond to those questions. And for those of you who are in the audience, Once we go through the presentation, there will be opportunities for you guys to ask questions that you may have. Does that work for everyone? All right, let's roll. All right, our first question. If international schools claim to prepare students for a global, diverse world, why does the leadership of those schools, particularly at the head of school level, remain so homogeneous? And what does that reveal about those leadership or whose leadership is truly valued? Wow, good question. Whoever would like to chime in first, you're more than welcome to do so.
Well, I'll chime in first.
Okay.
Um, that's a pretty heavy question, but at the end of the day, we need to look at this. I think it's very vital that we dive into this question because many times in this international world, you have all types of people who apply for heads of schools, head of school position. And I know that let me speak from personal experience. How about that? Personal experience for me, I've applied um, before. My credentials are there. Um, However, no response or thank you, but no thank you. Um, Part of me thinks that we say these things about our mission and vision, but are we truly living it? Are we truly being able to walk that out within the school? It's okay for someone who looks like me to teach. However, in leadership, that's an issue. It's always an issue. Or I can teach and possibly make it to vice principal, but to lead the actual institution, no, no. And part of that, I've had conversations with other people, and depending upon where you are in the world, um, it's stated that, or I won't say it's stated, I will say that the thought process is that um, we don't sell as much as other ethnicities do. Because again, it is about money. Um, and that is one of many reasons why I think that it stays the same. And it just depends on who your board is as well, your governing body, as to who they choose
Mm-hmm.
and their mentality.
Yeah. So I could chime in a little bit here. A very, very interesting question. Um, it took a while to process this question because obviously there are two levels on this. And so just allow me a little bit.
Yes.
So when I think about this question, I often think about, and this actually came through some of the research work that I was doing, Pierre Bourdieu's idea that institutions tend to reproduce the kinds of leadership they already recognize.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think of international education as an institution, and there's a point where it becomes an organism in and of itself. His research work came back with the idea
Mhm.
that institutions tend to reproduce the kinds of leaderships they already recognize. So that has stayed with me. So the issue is not so much a lack of the issue is not a lack of diverse leaders. It is how systems define and recognize leadership in the first place. And when we look at international schools through that, there's a lot of what we see starts to make sense. So the first thing I want to say, and just like what Dr. White just said, this is not a talent problem. There are many highly capable Black educators across international education. The challenge sits more in how pathways to leaderships are structured and how opportunities move through the system. So if we start to think of some of the key ideas that Bordeaux shared, one key issue is the leadership pipeline. Progression through headship often depends on what he would call different forms of capital. There's cultural capital, leadership styles, communication norms, and credentials that the system values. And there's social capital, which is about, the kind of networks, mentorship, and visibility. And then there's the one that we maybe don't see well is the symbolic capital, the prestige that attaches certain schools or career trajectory. Access to these is not evenly distributed. So by the time a board is appointing a head of school, the field has already shaped who appears leadership ready. And that's something that I'm beginning to realize as I ask questions and try to understand why certain people are constantly, turned around. Dr. White mentions governance and hiring. Boards are making high stakes decisions, and understandably, they want what is considered to be in their mind stability and success for their schools. But this is where the idea of something, he has a term that he calls habitus becomes useful. It refers to the unwritten expectation we carry about what leadership should look like and sound like. And when boards talk about, that kind of idea of fit, they're often drawing on these deeply embedded assumptions, sometimes without realizing it. So, hiring decisions can lean towards familiarity, not because of a kind of exclusion, not because it's an intentional exclusion, but because the system naturally gravitates toward what feels safe and recognizable. So these kind of ideas are the things that I'd like to throw into the mix in terms of looking at international education through that kind of philosophical lens in order to, because I think one of the risks is to kind of break it apart. And for me, I'm trying to understand it as a whole, so that if any response that we take to this, it has to be systemic as well, in order to kind of break that kind of idea of what leaders look like, and also to maybe remove the idea that choosing a person of color represents some element of risk. So that's my contribution to that question in terms of why that homogeneity exists. These are less about intentional decisions and more structural and systemic ones. And that lens helped me to understand why it is. It doesn't provide a solution, but it helps me to understand why some of the things you see happen naturally.
Great share. Dr. Beckwith, would you like to add to that?
So I think that I would probably move on to that question below, because that is a segue into that when we talk about they hire the best leader, whose race, passport, accent, and gender are silently built into that definition, and who I can't see the rest of the question.
I'm
it's
sorry.
a little bit late. Okay, who are excluded before the interview even begins. This is a critical point, and I want to just say that in that hiring process, how many of you have gone through this whole thing with a search company? Okay, and what happens with that search company when it's time to pass on that resume, when it's time to advocate for that person, and everything that comes up are those four things that are mentioned there: that race, that passport, that accent, that gender, and what's said about that. So for me, in terms of being excluded, that's the first place where you are really excluded for that head position, because that search institution, that your consultancy that you're working with has not and will not place your credentials in that positive light or speak for you. Okay, so I say to folks with this one is, when and where do you speak with them? What's your letter to them? Who's that contact, and what's that cultural question that you've asked for them? Because first and foremost, you must know if the school that you're applying to will even consider a person of color. Okay. And if you are wasting your time with that school, here is the time for us to roll back. However, is it right? Of course it isn't. However, but is that the state of things of the way they are? Yes, it is. And so in international schools that hire, they're saying, we've got the best leader, and you know that you outshine them 100%, but you never got a chance. So once again, let's start looking at who it is that you are working with. Okay. And let's charge them up about what it is that they're doing for you. Because a lot of times they're not your advocate. It hasn't happened. And so remember, people hire like-minded people.
Rarity.
Okay. The research shows that like-mindedness, whatever, and it doesn't particularly have to be that this person has been silent. I don't know them or whatever, but reaching out to the person who's hiring as well. Okay. How many of you have reached out to that person who is currently in that position? Okay. They can tell you the lay of the land, and they can tell you who it is and what's happening with that. So I would say, yes, we've got a problem with this as the best leader. And I have gone to bat for people that I believe are the best candidate. And then finding out who they hired, I had to agree with them that, yeah, that person was the better candidate at this point. And that's a reality of it as well. There very well may be, but not always. So once again, let's look at what we're doing with those consultancy agencies and what's happening with them, and try and charge them up as well on your behalf.
Thank you. Awesome.
Something else to consider as well, that I found out during doing research for my dissertation was that how many people actually want it? Like, this is the question: how many people people of color really want this position? We have to consider that as well when we're talking about why we don't see as many. While I know that the global or the international educational world is growing, is it growing that much for people of color? Don't know. It's just something to ponder.
I think another aspect of that also, Dr. White, and I ran up on this as I was completing my dissertation, and if I had time to write another one, this is what my topic would be as it relates to the role that colonialism plays in education, global education.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
education was not created for a person of color from its very beginning. So when you look at education from a global lens, colonialism, whether it's directly or indirectly or historically, has impacted the way schools are set up and how schools are run. That's why in certain countries, there has had to be laws put in place to ensure access and equity for children of color. So when we look at the international sector, even though in a lot of schools there are many children of color, the people that are put in place to run these schools were brought up in a system where all they saw were people that looked like them. So another aspect, and again, maybe it's an opportunity for me to write an article, but unpacking the role that colonialism plays in not only US-based education, but international education as well. Because we run our international schools as if they are schools in America in a lot of ways, especially American curriculum schools. So I just want to throw that in. Would anybody else? Kevin, would you like to say something in reference to those two questions before we move on?
I'm just going to let the panel do what the panel's going to do.
Okay. All right. All right. Anything else, guys, before we transition to the next? All right. Those of you who are in the audience, if you have questions, please jot them down. We're going to have time for your questions at the end, okay? All right, our next question. If international schools value global mindedness and diversity, Why does the pathway to headship still produce so many few leaders, and what systemic barriers? And we kind of discussed a few of those in the previous questions. In leadership pipelines, governance structures, and leadership perceptions. That's the interesting thing. Perceptions need to change. And I'll start out by saying, I think in some instances, the perception around the best candidate is white is right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So I can jump in on this simply because I also pointed out I'm gonna have to run as well. So um, I'll pick up the because I think I kind of mentioned some of the leadership pipeline stuff already. So I'm gonna jump in a little bit on the perception piece. And the bias in perceptions of leadership, and this is often the most subtle part of what's happening. So, you know, leadership often is not only about how someone leads, it is about how that leadership is interpreted, by the people you're leading. The same behaviors, for example, confidence, directness, advocacy can be read differently depending on who displays them. And again, I go back to, this research, the field, he talks about the idea that there's a kind of legitimization of certain expressions of leadership for some people more easily than others. So sometimes it's not so much about capability, but whose leadership is recognized as credible within the existing structure. So when you bring these together, we see a system that reproduces itself again because you know international schools can genuinely value global mindedness and diversity while still producing limited diversity at that level because the structures guiding the progressions, they themselves have not evolved. They're still the same structures like what you're talking about, the colonialism and so on. So, but the beauty of it is that this is not really fixed. Sometimes systems can change, but we just have to become more intentional about redesigning them in that sense. And that means for us, it's widening the opportunities, maybe more mentorship. Some of the stuff that happens a lot with ALOC. There has to be more intentional sponsorship happening. Um, Boards maybe need to really critically examine themselves about how they decide what fit is. And we do need to move away from these perceptions of what confidence looks like and how those fit to different people and move to a more collective understanding of what that really is in a genuine leadership environment. I think this is the bigger piece, as I've pointed out already. If we look at international schools in that way, and then a lot of schools say they want to change. It's still asking that questions. One of the biggest thing for me, and that's where I'm going to leave. I read an article, and I think it was posted in the ALOC Facebook page, where it says something about how elite international schools get recruitment wrong. And one of the key things, some of the feedback from some of the recruiters some of the schools was that, and I think Jennifer was talking about that, the panel that gets to the decision makers many times is not diverse in the first place. So they don't even get a diverse panel in the first place. And sometimes that's the weeding out process. And sometimes it's also people self-selecting and saying, I'm not going to apply for that school. And what that does, it actually it's like a self-licking lollipop, right? Because if you haven't applied, no one's applied. It's a sense of you could say no one's applied, therefore we shouldn't put them. Why is it no one's applying? That could be a massive slap in the face. But the other side of it is we also have to have a view to say, you know what, any job out there, we can take it. And it simply means that people need to push themselves and go past that feeling also of saying, that looks like they won't have me, and get out there and put that question to them. Because what schools are hiding behind is saying, I only had 5 candidates and not one of them was a person of color because the pipelines do that. And it gives them an easy getaway in the first place. So for me, that kind of leadership perception, the pipelines are some of the key things, but for me, it's a systemic issue that we still need to figure out a way to get people to realize that they're perpetuating, the systems that are there. And sometimes they think I'm just doing my job, but we might have to find a way to get them to answer that. So that's my question, my response to that question.
Thank you, Dr. Barker. Anyone else like to chime in?
Yes. I want to look at the perceptions as well, but in the lens of what I've noticed in this international world, not all the time, but majority of the time. When in some cases, when you do see people of color in these positions, particularly Black women in the position of head of schools, not all the time, but majority, they're fixing the place. Like you're fixing it. And once you fix it, oh, you've done your job now. This is our perception of you. You've already fixed our institution. We no longer need you. So they dismiss the Black woman, and then they put in someone else that does not look like the Black woman. and then the school then starts to go down, 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 down. And all of a sudden now we have to find another Black woman to come in and fix this institution again. So I think the perception of Black women is that, oh, we're fixers, we're great at fixing, but we can't sustain. No, we can sustain as well. I think the perception of those people that are in that place, that they need to examine that. Like, there needs to be some work on a whole different level.
Thank you.
So just a couple of things. One is that remember that a person's perception affects how they behave. Okay. It is really their belief, because their perception becomes their belief. And in schools, the belief is, will you stop? In schools, it becomes being able to become a part of the pipeline, and that eventually will say, yes, this is the person, or yes, I see your worth, because that's the perception most of the time, is that I really don't see your worth. Okay. And so with that, it becomes the governance question of who are they looking for? What's their perception? And why is that perception that way? And for, I would say 80% of them have never actually worked with a person of color in a leadership role. Okay. They don't have a clue. So their perception is, well, these are the people I've been working with for all these years, and they've been doing that position and they've done that job. I don't know about anything else. And so stepping out of that comfort zone becomes the issue. And how do we get them to do that? Is that once again, we have to be that person who does what? Any and everything. As LaSandra said, we go to those places that others don't want to go to. We become the fixer. We become the go-to person. And so for leaders to emerge, okay, you have to be willing to do some of those things. And some of us at this point are not willing anymore to do that. That we are constantly looking at the position that we know should be ours, and then saying it's the board, the leader who's there, those pipelines are not open. The valve has been turned. Okay. And how do we get that valve open? And so I'll speak to that in a little bit, but I really wanted you to understand that behavior, perception, and not having worked with a person of color in a leadership role are part of those key perceptions.
Awesome. I think another element of that I came across in my research is when we talk about a person of color, the majority of the research that I found through completing my dissertation was on women of color. But what about men of color? Mm-hmm. There is very, very, and if I had time to write a third dissertation, it would be on exploring men of color and their inability to get to senior leadership positions. I mean, Megel, I love you to death, and we go way back, but there's not a lot of you out there. I mean, there's more now than what it used to be, but when we look at Black men or men of color serving in head of school positions, The data is very limited, and that goes back to perceptions of governance structures, perceptions of leadership, in terms of how men of color are viewed. Because the women, as terrible as this may sound, we're a little bit safer because we lead from our heart. We're the emotional, person. And oftentimes when you look at male leadership data, it talks about men being strong, being stern, being willing to make decisions, being indecisive. I'm sorry, being very decisive. Where women on the other end, women of color, we're known as being indecisive, and we take our emotions too far. That's why we're not necessarily often put in those positions. But when we talk about men of color, that's another conversation for us to have in terms of perceptions, because our brothers are struggling. And there's so many gifted and talented men of color out there. The research that I found said that the majority of great men leaders end up having to lead in historically Black institutions, that they never get to translate to or transfer or transition to PWIs and institutions and organizations that have a history of whiteness and a history of being led by men from Europe or other parts of the world, those European men. So that's another perception that I wanted to throw out there in terms of work that needs to be done in our international sector.
Mona, if I may just jump in,
Sure.
for me, there's an aspect of when we are interviewed by these institutions and by these communities as such, right? It's almost be used as a tool to become an affinity space, right? So as a person of color, the white community can say, oh, but we have a person of color, and so therefore we're not racist as a community, and we're not this and we're not that, and that affinity to Black spaces does not make you less racist. The affinity to
Exactly.
Black spaces does not, right, unless you are working in a way that you are addressing the systemic issues within that, and race is a systemic issue. And international schools tend to deny that. That's the one part I feel very powerful about in terms of this. And then the other part is you're right, the trajectory I am, for example, South African, right? And I know that as a South African, I am not African American. And so as the head of school for most international schools, that's frowned upon.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because I don't have the accent. I do not have the behaviors that people talk about. So when we talk about internationalization of the school, as a South African, there's so many barriers that I encounter because my thought, the way I think is different. I have a very strong cultural identity that I bring to a boardroom, that I bring to a table. And you can see the uncomfortableness within that. And so I wonder that when we do join, we need to ask those really pertinent questions around that, and not just be a figure of fulfilling a criteria that makes us look less racist.
Absolutely. I do agree with you on that. I would also like to add, for that one person of color that actually exists in the organization, what does that belongingness feels like for that one person? Because you are absolutely right. One person of color does not take away the fact that you are underserving a population and that you're marginalizing a population, when often that one person is struggling to exist in that environment. Because it is safe.
Please.
Is that Mona's connection that's being
I think,
interrupted?
yes, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So while hers is being interrupted, maybe we can go on to the next question.
Okay. How do a potential candidate focus on increasing their odds for a leadership position and how to navigate a biased systems intelligently? Woof.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the question that I posed. And what I'd like to do at this point is go to a couple of slides that I have to share with you in terms of answering this question and maybe the one that's under this: once a head of school position is obtained, what attributes help a BIPOC to be successful? So if we can move to those slides, and then maybe we then can ask some questions, and we'll go from there. I want to first of all thank you for this opportunity to engage, and wonderful to see so
Kevin?
many of you here today.
Would you mind sharing?
And so
Yeah.
I'm going to start with a slide that comes up and it says, "So what?" Okay, so now we know all of this. Okay, we've got the research, and we know from the research of the people who are on this panel who have talked about what they found and how they found it and all of the things. And while you can't control someone else's bias, you can control your positioning, you can control your protection and your power. And so for the next few minutes, we're going to review I call it a strategic, practical list focused on increasing your odds, protecting yourself, and navigating a biased system intelligently and not emotionally, because that's what happens. We get emotional about this. And yes, it is an emotional issue because you're putting yourself out there. But the other people are saying, so what? Okay, so now we have to say, so what, and move on. The next slide talks about, now that we're moving on, it said, now what? Okay, so in the now what, I understand that this may feel like a storm for many of us. Okay, and you must be relentless in trying to navigate these communities that you're seeking to invade, because that's what you're doing. You're invading that space. You're saying to others that this is where I belong. And so what I want to do with you for just a few seconds so that you have a better understanding of what I'm talking about is let's review what I call, and I need you to be able to strengthen your strategic positioning. Okay. And to me, how do you strengthen your strategic positioning for the position that you are seeking? And so most of you are overqualified and your credentials are difficult to dismiss. So we're going to put that aside. You've added your certifications, you have measurable achievements, you've obtained leadership roles, but you just haven't had the opportunity to be that head. Okay, so now we must make bias harder to justify, because truly that's what it is. Okay, so when engaging with potential candidates, they tell me that their resume is tailored to the position description that they're looking for. They tell me that they've used those key words, if it's belonging, if it's safety of kids, if it's crisis management, whatever it is, the key words that are out there right now. They said, we've done all of that. And I've presented my accomplishments in a way that aligns with the institution's priorities. Okay. So I've done all of that. Now, let's talk about controlling your narrative. Okay. So are you ready with confident, polished answers when you interview? Okay. Do you have a prepared, strong, professional story that emphasizes results and reliability? And if you do, who else knows about your story? You see, a lot of us do a lot of work and no one else knows about it. Do the people in your school know about the work you do? Does a leader in your school know about the work you do? And if you have others who know the story besides you, are they telling your story when the time comments. Okay. If they call that leader in your school, are they able to talk about what you do? Okay. Have you had that conversation with them? And if not, that's something you need to think about in terms of controlling your narrative and what's out there. So slide number 3 talks about fatigue. And I know many candidates who are at this level, and many of you are in the fatigue mode because you're tired of trying to redirect those who are talking about inappropriate and problematic questions that because you want to get everything back to performance. You want that performance conversation of what you've done, and they're looking at something completely different. Especially problematic for educators moving from teaching positions to the first leadership opportunities, and those moving from other leadership positions to that HOS position. Okay. Once again, fatigue. So the next slide looks at the different levels of fatigue. And I need you in the chat right now. Take a look at that and put in the chat, where are you? Some of you are sick and tired of being sick and tired, and you have come up with a thing that now I'm not going out there anymore. I'm not putting myself out there. So if you would share in the chat on this level of fatigue for seeking a position, where are you? Let's share what we have with others, okay? So one of the things you cannot do as an applicant is allow yourself to linger in one of these levels of fatigue. Do you recognize where you are? So how do you continue now? You know, I'm tired of this. This is where you do a full day workshop and we explore each level. But today we just want you to put in the chat where you are and to consider the support of where you are. And we have to be able to separate rejection from worth. We also have to evaluate whether the job is worth it. Okay. So, all right, so the next slide. Remember that some environments are not just biased, they are structurally resistant to change. They're never going to have a person of color as the head of that school. It's not going to happen. So know the indicators of structural resistance before you apply. So those structural resistance things are in red. Ask yourself, if they're biased in hiring, what will promotion look like at this school? If I get into an entry-level position, will I ever be able to get anything else? What will the daily culture of that school look like? And will I be constantly having to prove myself? You've gone through that as a teacher. You've gone through that as you're coming up the ranks, constantly having to prove yourself. So in building your playbook, and I call this your candidate playbook, these are some of the other things that you're going to look at. And for many, walking away is strategic to your self-respect. We know you've done the research, intelligence building before you apply to include your data-driven, I call it language mapping, where you look at the demographic history of a school. So you look at the demographic history of a school and you still want to apply and they don't have anybody. Why are you wasting your time? Because I want to be the first. Okay. I want you to be realistic, intelligently look at those things. If a school has zero minority leaders in leadership, treat bias as structural. It's not isolated. So the next slide tells you've done your pre-interview submission, and how many of you have actually gotten to that interview? And I use this question as my, at the end of the interview, and they ask you, well, do you have anything that you'd like to ask us? This is my question to them. Anything What quality makes someone a strong cultural fit for your institution? What is your question that you ask at the end? Question that you ask at the end. Next slide. This is what I call your strategic entry plan. It's what you come to the table with. This is what I can and will do when you hire me. So if you would just look at this and you've got your leadership philosophy, you've got some measurable leadership impact. These are things that you've done. This is what you come to the table with. This is what you talk about. This is what gets you that second interview because you put something on their mind. So please, if you can share in the chat just one thing from this list of your leadership philosophy that stands out about you. Okay. You see, I know that the three people that are on this panel, that Mona is a curriculum genius. Okay. She can guide and direct and do professional development. I know that's what she does. For Megel, he is a published author. He writes. He tells that story. His articles are just impressive. He knows British curriculum. For LaSandra, she is that strategic thinker. She does analytics. She can tell you what's there, what's wrong, where you need to go. And it's been my pleasure to have worked with all three of them. So I know this. What is your strategic entry plan when you are taking a position? The next slide. Why this school? Why now? How will they know that you were the one? So what's your superpower? Okay. I've already told you what. How will they know that you were the one? Mona's superpower is, what Megel's is, what LaSandra's is. What's yours? And who else knows about your superpower? The next slide talks about making your expertise unignorable. This is what boards are looking for. A stabilizing leader, a systems thinker, a global communicator, a governance partner. What does that look like for you when you're talking? When other people are asking about? Where are the decisions being made for international school leaders? How do they make these decisions to hire this person? You see, these things could be your kryptonite if you haven't thought about them, if you're not able to articulate them, because when bias is subtle, you have to position yourself. The next slide talks about what the boards actually want. And this is key. And one of the main thing boards are looking at in terms of these kind of things, they really do want stability. And a lot of times they hire from within. Even though they may not be the best, but they do hire from within. And they're looking for enrollment growth. What have you done that is your classroom, if you're a teacher, if your class is your classroom that class that every parent wants their kid in? And every time something comes up in the school, here's your principal coming to you, here's your curriculum person coming to you, say, hey, I need you to work with me on this. Okay. Because the reputation is there, your reputation is there. Now, once again, this can lead to a different level of fatigue because you're always being called on as well, because they know you will do the work. The next slide, because I'm going to hurry through this. I want you to share for me. If your responses are grounded in equity, where leadership priorities are real, for that school, when you do an interview, do you feel seen, or are you just a token metric? And if the answer is no, I need you to critically assess whether you want to continue investing your energy there. And so those are some of the things that you have to do. I've spoken with candidates who say, I just don't want to be a head of school. I see what they do, but I thought I really wanted the chance to look at it and see. One thing about people of color or candidates of color that I've found is that sometimes we stay too long at a place, that sometimes we aren't willing to move. We aren't willing to take that job where there are 3 teachers and I'm a teaching head, because we know that the others aren't going to take that one. But sometimes we have to be able to make that leap, that jump, to be there to do that. And lastly, leadership is not about occupying a position. It's about strengthening the institution for the next decade. And you can only do that if you understand the bias that's there when you apply. All right, I want to thank you. That's enough. We've been too long, because those are probably 3 different workshops in 10 minutes. We're back to Mona.
Thank you for Thank you for that, Dr. Beckwith. It was awesome. Now the floor is, I know we have a little bit of time left. The floor is open for those of you that may have questions. Just raise your hand if you have a question, or unmute yourself and go ahead and ask. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Awesome. So if you guys have any questions, I don't want to overlook anyone. All right, if no questions, get back to you.
So let me just ask one other question. Where do you think the decisions are being made about who gets an interview and who finally gets the job? Where are those places? Remember, if you've seen the musical Hamilton, they talk about being in the room.
Being in the room.
Where is the room? Where are the rooms? Are they those conferences that you attend? Okay. Are they the blogs that are out there? Do they happen to be the webinars that you lead? Okay. Where is the room? Who's in the room? And how do you get it? Come on, you know.
Are you alluding to, Dr. Beckwith, are you alluding to the possibility that some of these things are happening outside of formal interviews?
Of course they are. Of course they are. And they've already selected the person before they even go to search.
Right.
Okay. So who's in the room? Okay. And where are the rooms? How many
You
of
have to
you?
get yourself in the room.
Where are the rooms? How many of you?
You have to get yourself in the room, right? If you've
Yes.
been the last 3 years I've been to Air Coast Leadership, you walk into Shangri-La Hotel in Bangkok, that Air Coast Leadership, over 200 schools in the Air Coast, that over 1,000 leaders there. The front room is just full of people having conversations. They're not even in the workshops. And that's where all the business is taking place over that 3-day conference. That's where those decisions are being made. It's held in October. That's before those leadership positions come out for headships. That's where all those conversations are happening. Decisions are being made right before everything gets released. That's just how it works.
Well
And
stated.
I'm sure the thing goes for NISA and AMISA and all the other leadership conferences happening globally, right? That's where you have to get yourself into, and you have to make your way into those spaces. I think the other powerful thing that you said earlier, Dr. Beckwith, was around the search firms. And you have to look at there's only 4 or 5 major players when we're talking about headship positions, and those are the ones that hold all the power. And are those institutions, and ALOC's made a lot of comments around some of them, are those institutions doing anti-bias work in order to even get us to a board, get our resume to a board to look at us, to give us an interview? Because the gatekeepers were all previous heads of schools themselves, those senior associates in these search firms. They're all from the dominant class, dominant race, cisgendered. We know who we're talking about here. They're not looking at us and seeing us as heads of school. So again, you have to fight your way in. And what I say to young leaders coming up is we have to network and we have to have conversations just like the dominant class has done for centuries and thousands of years. And it's up to us to do it for each other.
And so one of the other things that I tell prospective candidates is this, and the people on this call should know that every time you interview or every time you are rejected for an interview or not selected for an interview, everyone in this forum should know about it. They should know. We don't share enough. Okay. We don't put information out there for each other. Every question that was asked in that interview should be shared. Everything that was said in terms of your question that you asked at the end should be shared so that others have a chance and others know. It's sharing. It's the influence that comes. It's not just your contacts, but it is other influential people in those conversations that he just mentioned. And have you made a presentation? Okay. Everybody knows about Emily. Okay. They understand what Emily Matters is about. Okay. What is your superpower? Get out there. Don't let it be your kryptonite. Get in the room. Be seen in the room.
Hi, can I chime in? My name is Shingi. I'm currently in Doha, Qatar, and thank you so much for the presentation and the panel that put a lot of time and thought into sharing with us. One of my questions, concerns, or comments is how best we can integrate the challenges that we face as aspiring leaders or Black leaders because of the layers that we have. I appreciate one of the people that shared is from South Africa. And a big issue for me is that passport because I'm from Zimbabwe. And I've worked in various international schools as the only African hire. And at times I'll be the only Southern African hire with, the only Black Southern African hire with other African hires that are white. And that already is such a barrier to proceed to the next level because for a lot of us, we're only just getting into the schools. And then to now move forward to the next step where there are very few African leaders that are actually getting into the schools, it's so difficult. So I really appreciate and value the input that we have from Black leaders that are coming from America, that are coming from different parts of the world, from the UK. But I feel like these platforms have to integrate or put that second step for us as Africans because we are having that passport challenge to actually even get into conversations. So, you'll find schools that will hire because it's an American, whether they're Black, the fact that you're American puts you a bit further on in terms of the platform.
So one of the things that you have to really look for and look at when you're applying for a position is that is it a country that your passport will be accepted? There are so many countries out there that when you start to look and you want to hire somebody, you can't get them in because of their passport.
And it's getting worse.
And it will continue to be that way. And so you have to be strategic in looking at positions where you know at least that your passport will be accepted. And I always say to candidates too, if they call your school and ask about you, what's your leader going to say? Have you had that conversation with them? Does your leader know that you're interested in a position? Are they really going to be an ally for you? Are they really going to be an ally? And the other thing about that is that once again, we're looking at taking positions that possibly others are not looking at. Okay, as an entry point. Okay, and being the only one, you're always mostly the only one. Okay. So in doing that, it is what you do as the only one that everybody then says, "Oh, look at that! Look what happened." You're making your statement. Okay, you know the
You're making your
qualifications.
statement.
You are overly qualified. That's not it. But still, we have to prove ourselves. It's exhausting. It's that level of fatigue that we are constantly battling. Okay, but I don't want you to give up. Okay, I don't want you to think that it's not worth it. But once again, unless we share, unless we reach our hand out there and pull somebody else up with us, it doesn't happen. And so, once again, passport is an issue, no doubt about it.
And especially in the Middle East.
Oh, please.
Especially.
There is a long list in the Middle East of passports that will not be accepted.
Yes.
We have to go through them. I had a head of I had an owner of a school that would look at the passport of the person, and if it was a brown person, challenge you about why were you hiring them. It's like, are you serious? This is the best person for the job. Flat out, the end. But you have to have people that are willing to stand up for that bias.
Can I share that in some experiences, Dr. Beckwith, I've tried to hire someone and they waited until all American said no, and then at the last minute would open up the position to an African person or someone from India that was very well qualified, but I was unable to seal the deal with them until the head of school determined that no one from Canada or the USA would be applying for that position. That's happened to me several times. So you can advocate, but sometimes there are so many brick walls that are so hard to overcome.
Yeah, and no doubt we're taking those positions that others have said, oh, that's not one of those top tier schools. I'm not going there. And that's what happens. That's what occurs.
Kwame, did you have your hand up? Kwame?
Yep, I'm here. So, excuse me if you hear any background noise. I'm driving, but I had to get on this conversation. So, Dr. Beckwith made a lot of points that I agree with and I've experienced myself. And sometimes for us, we have to sometimes to the schools that may not be as reputable as the schools that, we all know about. So like in my case, for the past, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, I've tried to apply to different schools. There was actually a point where, I don't know if Mona, you remember, I was looking at school in DR at one point. I think the school you were in. And I tell you, if you weren't there, I probably wouldn't even have a shot at even talking to the people who are into that school.
True.
So for us, unfortunately, we're in a situation where you have to take the unconventional route. So in my case, I'm on the verge of getting a headship at a local international school in Zambia. And the only reason why I was able to do that was the school is 100% Zambian. There are no white folks in this. It's like a legit local international school. But I was able to get the position because I was in international school. They saw what I was able to do, and from that was like the interview, just that body of work as a consultant. So sometimes it's not always going to be the research associates and the ISSs and the world and the GRCs, all the other ones, because a lot of them already engage in gatekeeping tactics anyway. So even if you put that application in through those channels, it's not even have a shot. So game of networking, you still have to ingratiate yourself with people who are in those rooms already, even if they don't look like us, which is annoying. And even with that, you don't even get a chance to even interview or to talk with the people of influence. So yeah, there's a lot of brick walls, but I think the best thing we can do is, like Dr. Beckwith says, share information. Anything that we can get into, gotta pass it down to each other, because that's how they get opportunities. That's how they're able to, monopolize the recruitment processes, because they share with each other in areas or settings where they're not traditional. So if you're not going to be in the session itself, is like folks have said, it's going to be at the bar during happy hour. It's going to be in the hotel room. It's going to be, when they're out and about touring the country that the conference is in. Those are the opportunities. That is how you're able to socialize. It's not always about how competent you are. It's about whether or not you can get drunk with this person, whether or not you can you're someone that's sociable and is able to engage with folks. Like, the criteria constantly changes, and therefore the goalpost changes. But I think the best thing we can do is continue to just build our capacity and continue to lean on the people within our circles who can continue to vouch for us. I know it's tough, but that's the way we have to go. I mean, I spent years looking for a job, for let alone a leadership job, like just a job, even get into the classroom. And even with my credentials, I still have a struggle locking in jobs, because you're not in the in crowds, and we know who's in those in crowds. It's the same people that do the keynotes. It's the same people that lead presentations in the major international school conferences that we know of. It's pretty much the same folks. And if you're not kind of in that space, it's hard to penetrate. But I'll leave it at that. I got more, but I want to make sure other folks get a chance to share. Thank you so much.
One thing I'm going to say to you, I need you to get in that space. I need you to be a keynote. I need you to be a presenter. I need you in that room. I need you in that room.
Mhm.
Thank you. Andre, your hand is up, Andre?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much indeed for the panel, and thanks, Kevin. Real honor and privilege to be here. You do have someone in your corner in me, and I want to make that completely crystal clear and obvious. There are people out there, who are with you, on your side. There are organizations that are trying to do the right thing. And if Kevin would allow me, this is not a sales pitch, but our mission is to level up international school leadership. That's our mission. That's why we exist. That's what we do, why we do. And I want you to help people tell that. I want you to help people tell that. For us to amplify that voice. One thing that I'd like to ask, you talked about getting in the room. I visit a lot of schools around the world. I get in that room. I get in that inner sanctum with the principal. Maybe I'm privileged to be able to do that. But I want to challenge you all to ask, what do I need to be asking these principals? Give me questions, give me tools, give me questions. I ask them questions, what they ask in interviews. I ask them, do they know their carbon footprint? I ask them questions about them, their schools, mission, vision, and values, but please let me know to move forward here. What do I need to be asking them? How do I need to be challenging them so that I can then monitor, we can collectively gather research. If these people don't know what they're talking about, then we need to be calling them out, and we need to be challenging them so that they start to take the role a lot more seriously than they currently are.
I would say, Andre, that conversation would need to go above the principals. Not that they should not be included, but that conversation should be held with senior leadership and the governance structure within the organization. Because oftentimes it's a top-down trickling system of who we hire, the type that we hire, what we think is fit based on our biases. So to your point, I do believe the principals should be included in that conversation, but I also believe that other stakeholders have more leverage around the hiring process, and even HR, because in some organizations, HR does the vetting. And if they are going by, well, we've only had this type of people, they also go through vetting out potential candidates based off of the history. And Andre, what I'll do is reach out to you, and you and I can have more conversation in reference to this if you'd like.
I would love that. Thank you so much.
If I could jump in just for a minute from the experience, because I've been working with Kevin on the recruitment side of this for now, we're going into 3 years. So one of the things that I see missing a lot that I think you could post to the schools is we kind of forget, and I've done a lot of leadership development, and we sometimes get caught up and we forget why we're in schools to begin with. And of course, it's about the students. So I've been doing a lot of thinking on how we can get these parents and governing boards to turn around. One of my thoughts are that, and there is a lot of data out there, is when all we have is white leadership, majority white leadership in these international schools, it is not a representation of the student body in these international schools. That is very much to the detriment of the students. I mean, we're not that it's not good when we have international schools where the majority of the student body is not white, but yet all they see is white leaders. That's not good. To me, what it says is, oh, I can maybe be a teacher because we have more representation there, but I can't aspire to be a leader because I don't see anyone that looks like me. I don't see anyone. So I mean, I don't know I'd like to know what some of your thoughts are, but that is one thought that I'm trying to emphasize more and would like to see emphasized more to the schools is by not having a diverse leadership, you're really hurting the students. You're really hurting the students.
When you ask the schools this, what are the responses?
I mean, I'm usually working within HR or the leadership people. So the top leadership in the schools. And, they just actually, I don't know that I've ever actually got, when I've presented that I've got much of an answer.
And you won't. And you will not.
Exactly. I mean, that doesn't surprise me. Okay. I'm not surprised by that at all. But they want to skirt around it.
Those are those environments that are not just biased, but they are structurally resistant to change.
Absolutely. Like, what you had on that slide with the schools that like we've been working with, it's entirely correct, like all of those things. I'm just trying to think because I come from a background of program and project management, which involves a lot of change. I mean, what we're asking schools to do is change. It's change management. So, and I mean, it is difficult and it's never easy to do that, but I'm trying to think. I've always prided myself on the project and program work is coming up with strategies to start to get them on board. And that's why I bring up the representation thing, because we do have a lot of data there to support what I'm saying about that. And it is about the students in these international schools.
But
Absolutely.
it's also about those parents. Those
Well,
parents are
right.
also saying,
But
I want my kid with this type of teacher.
absolutely.
And so until we're able to get those bias triggers that they are mentioning and they are engaged in, it's going to be an evaluative process to recalibrate
Yes.
everything that's happened with them. And that means parental guidance and working with parent groups. You have an outstanding teacher, and she's an outstanding teacher no matter. Okay. And that becomes that person that everybody wants. And I want that person. I want my child with that person. But you also look at every one of the kids in this class is Indian. Okay. And there's not one Indian teacher.
Exactly.
Okay. So what does that say about my culture?
Mm-hmm.
What does it say
That's what I'm
about,
getting at. Yes.
yes. And culturally, and it's what I said again about the cultural question that you ask. The cultural assessment of that community that you're looking at in terms of working with. So
Yeah,
I
I
would
mean,
think that those
I
are
know
some of those questions you'd be asking.
I worked in Malaysia I worked actually in a project with government schools, so I didn't work, but I had friends that were working in international schools. And that was a big issue with that is the parents they wanted primarily white teachers and certainly white leadership. But that was my thing. I know it will take time, but the data is there. If we can start to get schools to share that when they push back on wanting all white staff and share the data and actually start to get them to realize what they're actually showing their children and how it is detrimental of them when they don't have leaders and in that look like them, what that does. I think it'll be a long process, but I don't really think a lot of the parents really understand how detrimental that is. And there is the data out there.
Correct. And they don't understand. I want to give Tico a chance to respond because he's been waiting for a moment. Go ahead, Tico, and good morning or good afternoon. Good to see you.
Good morning, Mona. Mona, I'm sorry I joined late and my Wi-Fi was all over the place. I'm in Panama now. Mona, did you put in a plug for New Leaders of Color or anything like that?
I have not had a chance to do that just yet, Tico, but by all means, you have the floor,
Okay.
sir.
Hey, Laura.
Hi,
Not bad.
everyone.
How
I
you
just
doing?
want. All right. Maybe we need to. Okay. So as ALOC has the Aspiring Leaders of Color program for folks who aspire from maybe head of grade, department head to go into vice principal, principal roles. So I just encourage you to look at the ALOC's Aspiring Leaders of Color program, as well as Mona and I started this year, the New Leaders of Color program, so that as we help folks get positions of leadership, we also help them be successful as they join these groups. And I wanted to respond to one of the things you said. As you said, it was change management, and it's particularly hard change management because it's changing culture and it's changing power dynamics. People have something to lose with this, and that's part of why there's so much resistance. It's unsaid, but it's like, wait, hold on. I kind of have my entitlement or my privilege. I am well known, and I've got that network going. And then last, I did want to share a couple of things about my stories, and just like Kwame, Mona's in the middle of one of them. I speak Spanish fluently, but I did most of my international work in Asia, and I could get jobs at high levels in Asia at great schools, and I couldn't even get a foot in the door at schools that probably aren't as reputable, even though I'm a native Spanish speaker at schools in Latin America or AMISA, because they didn't know me, and knowing me was everything. And I think it's for all of us. So I think I want to repeat that story about just go and present and go and be seen. Ryan mentioned IRCOS. I happened to be in Bangkok at the time. I didn't even attend. I hung out at that lobby that he's describing every single day. And I was full of conversations every single day. That was the networking. That's where the power was there. So again, encourage you, like you say, there's the ideal world that I wish we lived in, but there's a world that we actually live in. And in that world, you got to present, you got to be seen, and you've got to connect. And it seems particularly important for international school leaders. And then lastly, I think Kevin also knows my work, and Andre, just like you, I'm going to do a plug, but it's not about money. I do this work at this tail end of my career, but I help folks with the practical parts of getting a job. I do open doors. I do help with resumes. I help with interview preparation. I help you through the emotional journey, Jennifer, that you were talking about, these ups and downs and getting rejected when you know it's not about you. And so if you want someone at your side through the recruitment process, that's work that I do now at this point in my life, is helping folks from marginalized communities get that leadership job.
Thank you, Tico. Is there anyone who would like to add anything else to contribute to the conversation before we close?
So I want to go back to a point that Ann made regarding just the recruitment process. So, like I mentioned, I'm at a school where 100% of the staff is Zambian and the majority of leadership is Zambian, but yet the strongest influence are from investors of the school. So they make a lot of decisions regarding expenditures, especially in a situation like where I'm in, where the school is still being rented, and you hit this, and the board is still paying a debt to these investors. So in this case, it's the Jesuit community here who have a lot of influence over a lot of the local schools, and a lot of folks who are in those spaces, they do not look like us. So I just wanted to bring that up. Even when you have the perfect situation where you have all the right demographics, even the right leader, sometimes it's the investors who have the most impact on governance structures and everything else. And that's not always easy to pin. Even with the organizational structure on paper and the right personnel in place. So that was the other part. And then to Tico's point, I can attest to the fact that networking and exposure is everything. You got to do the presentations. You got to put in the proposals. You also have to, get on LinkedIn. Like, I'm on LinkedIn every single day, trying to talk to people who are either in those spaces or adjacent to those spaces. And while it can be exhausting and time consuming and tedious, it does make a difference, because when you put yourself out there, the return of investment is information. The return of investment sometimes is a connection that can lead to another connection. And the international school community is pretty small. Once you kind of know 3 or 4 people, particularly those who are pretty influential, you then end up, knowing other players in the game that can then give you access to other spaces as well. So I'm just speaking from experience that you do have to get your name out there. I know in my case, it was easier because I think for whatever reason, whenever you write publications and you have, you know, books and things with your name on it, that alone gives you more attention just because you got a book or you wrote this publication for this major platform. So I've been fortunate to leverage those things to get attention, even though I've been, for the most part, international school adjacent for most of the time I've been abroad. So like those type of things matter to people who are in the space. And believe me, they'll stalk your page, they'll pay attention to what you're doing. They may never connect with you or follow you in those platforms, but they pay attention. And so you just got to keep putting yourself out there. Exposure and networking is everything, especially in this ecosystem. You can't avoid that. You got to do it.
Thank you.
That's all I got.
Thank you for that, Tico. Thank you for that, Kwame. Would anyone else like to add anything before we close? If not,
I do, Mona, I just do. There is support out there. You know, there are people who want to help. So I'm sorry. That's what I want to say. Sorry.
no worries. As my buddy Tico was saying, there is support out there. Tico and I don't know if you can get the connection, but he and I work together quite a bit in terms of coaching and leadership and guiding our new leaders of color. So if there's anything that he, I, or Andre, or anybody else on this call can do for you, please do not hesitate to reach out to any of us. We are here to support. As you all know, we love Kevin. We love ALOC. This is our space that we protect and that we use to honor and support one another. So take advantage of the opportunities. Reach out to the people on this call. If you need any of our information, you can receive that from Kevin if you like, or if you would, or I can put my information, Tico, put your information in the chat. And if you would like to have additional conversations on how we can support you or the organizations that you currently reside in, by all means, please reach out to us, because this is the circle. This is the space that has the responsibility of making the world a better place and to make sure people of color have an opportunity to get into these spaces that have historically been closed to us. So please take an opportunity, look in the chat, get everyone's information, and reach out to us. We're here for you, and we're here to support you and your organization. Anyone else like to add anything? Anyone else? I don't want to leave anyone out. If not, the panel members, would you stay on? Everyone else, thank you so much for your time. We learned so much from you. We appreciate you for taking the time to join us. It was a teaching and a learning session. Thank you to Dr. White, Dr. Barker, and Dr. Beckwith for sharing your experiences with us. And more is coming on this. Kevin, I think this should be something that we continue. This doesn't need to be a one-time situation. I think based off of the conversations and the dialogue that came up, we can add to this because it was powerful. I really enjoyed every one of you, and thank you for allowing me to host this space. Everyone else, enjoy the rest of your morning, your afternoon, or your evening, wherever you may be on this earth. And LaSandra, Kevin, and Dr. Beckwith, if you would stay on, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm about to go off, I promise. Dr. Beckwith, I've just never met you before. You were amazing. I don't want to point out that others weren't. I've never heard you speak before. I thought you nailed that balance between the ideal and the real world and just preparing folks for the real world, everything. So anyway, I just wanted to say that was fantastic. Thank you. And I hope we have a chance to, connect some more in the future.
Thank
All right.
you.
So I'll connect you with her.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, bye-bye.
Hello? Can you guys hear me? Okay, I just wanted to say thank you, thank you, thank you so much for taking the opportunity to join us. It was amazing.
It was really good.
It was really, really good. And as I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh, that's an article. I need to write that. That's another article. I need to write that. LaSandra, you and I are supposed to be getting together, working on some writing. We need to do that.
Yes, we do.
And I wrote that you have time. Okay, you have time. That's a book. That's an article.
Yes.
You have time.
Well, I appreciate you for
right. Don't worry. I'll keep plugging that.
Okay.
You'll hear from me about that.
All right, we can definitely do it. Kevin,
No, I didn't say me. I said you.
Oh, okay.
I said nothing about me. That's you and LaSandra. I said anything about me.
I'm ready. I'm ready for it. I'm gonna stay here this summer because, like I said, it was starting a different position, and opening a school that's a lot.
It's a lot, man.
Tell me about it.
Yes. Just know I will be calling.